Alright, so I'm not going to say much backstory besides my husband, John, fake names, has a 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, from a previous relationship. He was with her mom Emma from when they were 14 till 19. They had Sophie when they were 18, and they weren't together, but they were messing around until I came along. I've been with my husband for 3, almost 4 years, and we've been married for a year with a 9-month-old daughter, and I'm currently 15 weeks pregnant with another daughter. I love Sophie to death, I really do. I view her as my own and treat her like so, which has been perfectly okay and completely encouraged by my in-laws and husband, and me and Sophie have an amazing bond. This Christmas, we were supposed to be going to California to go visit my extended in-laws, with Sophie, my 2 daughters, my mother-in-law, father-in-law, sister-in-law, and 2 brother-in-laws, so that the girls can meet their great-grandma and all of their cousins around the same age. The plan is to go there and stay at John's great-grandma's house, because she has just moved into a huge house with multiple rooms, and I've been excited and planning this trip for my husband and girls for a while. Well, yesterday I was hanging out with my mother-in-law grocery shopping, and she casually mentions that Emma is planning on coming on the trip, but nothing has been set in stone. I asked questions about living arrangements, and she's supposed to be staying with all of us in John's great-grandma's house. John knew nothing about this, by the way. I get upset and tell her that I'm not okay with that, and it feels disrespectful to bring her with us to stay in the same house as John's wife and expect us to act like a happy little family when this is not her family anymore and never will be. And I understand she's Sophie's mom, but that's all she is. Nothing more, nothing less. And if she's going to bring her along, then me and my 2 girls won't go. Instantly, my mother-in-law snaps at me that I'm a selfish, ungrateful bee, and I have no right to put them in that situation. And she's as much as family as I am, which I do not agree with. And we just argued until she took me home, and things have been tense since. I am in no way trying to get in the way of Sophie and Emma's relationship, and I'm not trying to replace Emma. We get along now, but there were problems in the past of her not giving John his court-ordered parenting time, which is why I'm so adamant about her coming for Christmas. John has never been allowed to have Sophie for Christmas until this year, when we kept threatening court, and so she finally buckled down, and I just don't think it's right for her to impose that way when it's the first year having her. I also think it's straight disrespectful to treat me and her like we're the same. She is John's past. I feel that she is not the one married to John, so she is not part of John's family. So am I the a-hole for telling my mother-in-law if my husband's baby mama goes on vacation with us, then I will not go? Edit. My husband fully agrees with me and says he wouldn't be comfortable with her going either, and he will not go either if his mom is going to let her impose on his first Christmas with his daughter and get in the way of his court-ordered parenting time. Holy crap, not the a-hole. It needed saying and shutting down right then and there. But I'd let John handle it from here on, though. Not the a-hole. I wonder why your mother-in-law is so lenient with a woman who pretty much screwed over her son by denying him his visit. It's always been this way, weirdly. When we were threatening court about parenting time, mother-in-law was calling and harassing us and saying awful things about us not thinking of the kids, and we were taking away her routine. And if things had been this way for so long, why change it and things like that? Not the a-hole, though this is far less about it being disrespectful, and more about how she's disregarding court-ordered family time. It's time she gets to spend with her dad, and considering the bad blood between mom and dad, she shouldn't be there. I know the title might be confusing, and I know this is some Jerry Springer level crap, so bear with me. My mother-in-law was my brother's PhD advisor. Without going into a bunch of unnecessary detail, they ducked around. He got her pregnant, and it was a huge shock to my then fiancé and I. I was totally devastated for selfish reasons, but it just felt so icky. I was mad at mother-in-law for not knowing better. I was mad at my brother for having a relationship with a woman who had treated me like trash. I was just mad I was going to have a sister-in-law who was also my niece. Mother-in-law dumped my brother and said she was just having fun and would never seriously think about a man significantly younger than her. My brother was devastated. He was very much under her spell and thought he was in love with her. Mother-in-law wanted to keep the baby, but said she thought he had a right to opt out and she thought it would be wrong to ask him for any support, emotional or financial, and encouraged him to not sign the birth certificate. He had some contact with his daughter, we'll call her Grace, but mother-in-law didn't want him around too much and he was in a dark place in his life. He got another advisor, but his motivation dropped, and he graduated but wasn't happy with his work. He then began to realize how competitive the market was and felt like his PhD was useless. I also think he associated the subject too much with her and was just disillusioned with everything. He settled for a job that has nothing to do with his degree and that he doesn't like. developed a little bit of a drinking problem, and saw Grace here and there. Mother-in-law got a boyfriend her own age who Grace loved. She began to call him Dad, and they got married eventually. I have a hard time being around any of them with what mother-in-law did to my brother. I make the occasional obligatory visit, but honestly, I hate her. Grace never wanted much to do with her bio dad, but in the past couple years, he's gotten his life together, married a very sweet woman, and had a baby. Grace makes no effort to see him. She is 15 now, and all Grace cares about is that her a-hole stepdad is going to buy her a fancy car next year. However, she sometimes makes comments about how my brother is a real dad to the baby. We went to mother-in-law's house last night for one of those super not fun obligatory dinners. Mother-in-law wanted Grace to pack her lunch for her tournament the next day and told her to put the phone down and come do it. Grace replied, "Hold on, I'm talking to my sperm donor." And I snapped and told her she is a spoiled brat and how dare she call her father that. She doesn't know anything about what he has gone through, and he does love her, but she only cares about what her stepdad buys her. Mother-in-law immediately yelled at me and asked me to leave. She says I crossed a huge line, and I owe Grace an apology. "You're the a-hole. What happened to your brother is sad, but I think you have a lot of misplaced anger towards your niece. She's 15 and made a comment that, in her immaturity, she thought was funny. She doesn't understand the nuance of the situation, and she should not be blamed for having a strong relationship with her stepfather, as he was the one raising her. You're the a-hole. Grace wasn't raised around or by her bio dad. Only towards her teenage years do you describe your brother to have gotten his things together. While that may be great for him, that doesn't mean Grace is obligated to spending time with him if she doesn't want to. Genetics doesn't make a parent, OP. The man who is with your mother-in-law was there her whole life. If that's who she shares that connection with, you have no place whatsoever to not only call her a spoiled brat, but to then insist her father is your brother and not the man who raised her. You owe Grace and her father an apology." Wow, you're the a-hole. I don't care how hard the woman makes it to see her kid. In America, fathers can fight for custody and to see their child. It sounds like you're blaming your mother-in-law when your brother opted out of parenting duty. That's on your brother. If his daughter thinks of him as just a sperm donor, that's on your brother. It's unfair to take out your frustrations on Grace. This situation is not her fault, and quite frankly, from her perspective, her father is just a sperm donor. So, myself, 27 male, and my fiancée, 28 female, have been together close to a year, engaged for half of that. We're planning a wedding in the fall of 24 and have started a guest list. She comes from a big family, and I'm an only child. We are close with one of her sisters in particular, and often went to visit her and play board games and such. This sister has a fiancé and is pregnant. Recently, my fiancé told me that her sister was having a shotgun wedding before the baby arrived, in order to keep with their traditional values and appease familial religious desires. Back up a bit. I've done a lot for her sister and soon-to-be husband. I planned a birthday party for his son from another marriage. I've given her rides, always bought small gifts when I would visit. I've gone as far as to stop everything I was doing to help her during a health scare while she was pregnant. I really felt like a part of the family. Fast forward. In a text to my fiancé upon announcing her wedding, her sister made it a point to say, "It's a small wedding, no plus ones. OP can come to the dinner afterwards." All fine by me. I honestly don't really mind, as ceremonies can be dull, and I understand why she would only want to have immediate family at her small wedding. I wake up on the day of the wedding to help my fiancé get ready and drive her over to her sister's house. I planned on driving my fiancé, her sister, and her soon-to-be husband to the venue and bringing them to the dinner afterwards. My fiancé told me, "It's okay, just drop me off at my sister's and we will get a ride over." A little odd, but I was fine with that too. I arrived over there, and as my fiancé got out of the car, I asked her if I could come in and congratulate them. She seemed hesitant and said, okay, let me just text my sister to make sure." I was dressed in plain clothes and was hesitantly invited to come inside. We walked up to the house. Inside was a party of her siblings and their friends and significant others all dressed up. They all looked at me and didn't say much. I saw another one of her sisters, and her new boyfriend was in a suit. Everyone was invited. The no plus ones only applied to me. I immediately left, and in a text told my fiancé they were off the guest list for our wedding. My fiancé is upset at that, because her sister is her close friend. She said maybe I did something to upset them, which is why I wasn't invited. But I've been nothing but kind and caring to her entire family. I've spent hundreds of dollars and gone above and beyond for everyone. Now we are fighting over this. Am I the a-hole? Seems to me your fiancé knew beforehand about you being the only one not invited. I think you also have a fiancé problem if she can keep this from you as well as not backing you up on inviting her sister. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Your fiancé went along with excluding and manipulating you into believing the no plus one rule. No matter how much she may try to pin it on the sister, family, whoever, she was an active participant. A true partner wouldn't have allowed that, or at the absolute bare minimum, would have been honest with you about why you weren't wanted at the event. This behavior is not even a red flag. It's a biohazard sign. You've been together for less than a year, so you still have ample room to make a clean break and find someone who appreciates and includes you. I am concerned your fiancé did not stand up for you. That's a huge red flag. I understand why you feel the way you do, but you may have to cave in order to appease your fiancé. Not the a-hole. My beloved mother-in-law passed away recently. She had a few signature recipes that she always brought to family gatherings. One of them is a very unique dessert. I asked for the recipe for years, and she would never share it. She finally passed the recipes down to me not long before she passed away, and I made all of them to share with friends and family at the repast meal after her funeral. I also made the dessert one other time to bring to a family gathering sister-in-law was hosting. My sister-in-law loves the dessert. She keeps calling it her dessert and demanding I share the recipe with her every time we see each other. I feel like if mother-in-law wanted her to have it, she would have shared it with her, and the fact that she's already claiming the dessert as her own, instead of calling it the name mother-in-law assigned to it, is disrespectful to her memory. Mother-in-law did not specifically mention whether or not she was okay with me sharing said recipes. She did also share the recipes with my stepdaughter, 15, and one other grandchild, 19. Both agree that I should not share the recipes with sister-in-law. My husband thinks I'm being a little petty, and it's not something I should start a family feud over. This is his brother's wife and his mother's recipes, so I do feel his opinion also matters. So am I the a-hole? Edit. I do feel the need to add a little context here. 1. This is not my mother-in-law's daughter. It's her daughter-in-law. 2. I wasn't bringing my stepdaughter and niece into it as support for my argument, but as proof the recipes have already been handed down to the next generation by mother-in-law herself, and I am not the only person who has it. 3. My sister-in-law was not at all close with my mother-in-law because she treated her horribly, which is most likely the reason she didn't give her the recipes. 4. I did get one reply here that was actually constructive, and I may change my mind about sharing the recipe eventually. I do realize it's not my recipe. I feel it does belong to my husband's family. Typically, I'm not a recipe gatekeeper. I have shared my own late mother's recipes far and wide, including with the sister-in-law in question. I just didn't like the way she demanded to have it and claimed it as her own, instead of putting due respect on my late mother-in-law's name. Not the a-hole. You made the argument, if mother-in-law wanted your sister-in-law to have the recipe, she would have given it to her. That alone is reason enough to keep it to yourself. You're the a-hole. Gatekeeping family recipes is petty and childish. Does it make you feel important somehow? I don't get this. People post this topic frequently. I think you're being rude and on some kind of power trip. It's not very nice. Not the a-hole. Sister-in-law is being pushy. Don't reward her aggression. If mother-in-law wanted her to have the recipe, she would have bestowed it on her. She gave it to 3 people and no others, so that's how she wanted it to go down. Your husband is really wrong. He should back you up. And you aren't starting a family feud. Sister-in-law is. It's interesting, though, to see mother-in-law called beloved. That happens very rarely hereabouts. My wife and I just got back from our honeymoon, settled in our first ever house, and decided to invite both of our families to dinner to celebrate. My wife takes a lot of pride in our house and her new wife role, so this was a big deal to her. My mom came with her boyfriend Ted and his teenage daughter Emmy. Now for some context. I think Ted is an a-hole and the kid isn't great either, but I guess gets a pass because no one taught her manners. My mom thinks the sun shines out of Ted's butt and treats Emmy like her do-over child. For dinner we had chicken, potatoes, salad, and squash. Everyone was free to get their own condiments. During dinner, Emmy began whining and complaining we only had the mustard type of honey mustard and not the salad dressing kind, and she only likes the salad dressing. Ted told her to just pick something else, then laughed about how what my mom was doing looked interesting, pouring soy sauce on everything. Then he loudly announced that if you season food while you cook it, you don't have to pour condiments all over it. I looked to my wife and saw her looking like she was about to cry. My mom giggled, so I glared at her. She stopped but didn't say anything. I announced that it was rude as duck to walk into someone else's house and insult their hosting. He tried to laugh it off and be like, well, we were all family now. I was furious and demanded he apologize. He said he was sorry, but then muttered how he doesn't like cold condiments on warm food, but this food needs something. I told him to get the duck out. Emmy was like, "Oh good, we can go get other food." My mom said nothing to either of them and just asked if I was serious. I said I was, and if she wants to choose him, that is fine, but they need to get out. My mom snapped at me that I have a wife and a new life, and of course she is going to choose him, and called me delusional. They left, and mother-in-law and her husband berated me about how rude I was, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Now my mom is angry and says I was just acting like a spoiled brat because I hate Ted, and pointed out that when mother-in-law first started dating her husband, he said some much worse stuff, and he got a second chance. I told my mom I really do love her and want her in my life, but Ted is banned as he was cruel for no reason and hurt my wife. Edit. It was a roast chicken, but to be honest, had no flavoring as we had sauces available. You admitting your wife served unseasoned chicken makes his comments make more sense. He shouldn't have said it, but you overreacted, and she needs to get thicker skin. If she's going to cook for others, she needs to understand seasoning is part of it if she wants people to like her food. The real a-hole here is the chicken. The actual audacity of that chicken letting itself be served with no seasoning. We are all judging you, chicken.